Chris Garrison. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Phil. I'm excited to be here.
So I'm Phil. I'm a partner at Webisoft. We build custom software, and we started this podcast because we're very curious about the industries we operate in, and also because we wanted more video content for LinkedIn. But I'm not supposed to say that out loud. I'm here today with Chris from Origin Provisions. Chris, you want to take a couple minutes, explain who you are, what you do?
Sure. So my name is Chris Kirsten. I live in Northern California, predominantly work in the meat and agriculture world, but have been a entrepreneur and entrepreneur among a bunch of different things. But what we're talking about today is Origin Provisions. It's a new company that my business partner David and I started about a year ago to disrupt the better for you meat space. So our aim is to take grass-fed beef and make it more affordable for everybody in a time when everybody else's prices are going up. We're trying to flip the script, be positively disruptive, and keep prices the same and bring them back down. So that's our focus. We come from the nonprofit space. So before this, I worked at an agricultural nonprofit that started a regenerative agricultural certification. And so where we were working with brands and retailers to help them source supply all around the world that is proven to be making their land healthier, that you're actually stewarding the land in such a way that it's getting better. And David, my business partner, and I looked at each other and said, where can we go next? How can we have more impact? We said, let's take something to the marketplace. How could we make grass-fed beef the norm, that everybody out there that wants a better for you product, that wants to avoid feedlots in the meat that they choose to eat, how could we make that even bigger? And we said we have to bring the cost down. So that's been our focus and what we've been doing. And I think we've hit some big successes in our first year, but a lot more to come, hopefully.
Very cool. Do you think the current environment helps you, or meaning like I think people are more and more price sensitive, obviously, as prices of food is going up, inflation's up. Obviously, it's not a great time at the moment on the world stage. Does that help a company like yours that's kind of positioning itself as a kind of affordable option?
Yes, I think timing is good if you're willing to pivot to what the timing presents,
Right. If
and
you're
so
nimble.
exactly. Exactly. I think we are entering an era, and I think the last, quarter century has been this way, that nimbleness is the key. I mean, things are changing faster than they ever have before. I heard a comedian, joking about a public event that seems, sort of like, old news now. And he was like, this was 2 weeks ago, guys. Like, this is the world we live in today of how fast stuff moves. So yeah, I think you have to stay nimble. There's two pieces I can pull apart there in terms of timing. So one, I mentioned this idea of regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is this movement. It's this burgeoning, growing global movement about farmers that focus on stewardship, focus on not making compromises in how much they grow, but healing the land at the same time. They're mimicking nature. They're using nature as a pattern, as a mentor, and really, really incredible things are happening. There's people out there that are healing their landscapes and growing the food and fiber that we need. It's super exciting, and that had been my focus for 8 to 10 years of my career. And I was able to go to companies and say, hey, we can help you hit your CSR goals, your ESG goals. We can help you hit those environmental goals that you've set through insetting, through the sourcing that you are making the materials that are going into your widgets, whatever it is you're producing. And we were working across meat, dairy, wool, and leather. So we were doing stuff in apparel with like Caring Group that owns Gucci and Balenciaga and Saint Laurent. We were
Mhm.
doing stuff with Timberland and UGG, and then we were doing stuff with milk companies like Alexander Eco Farm Dairy, and we were doing stuff with like Hormel and Applegate and Chomp Snack Sticks and Serenity Baby Food, and it was really, really, really cool education. And then the political climate shifted, and all these companies were like, wait a minute, we just went from a climate where our investors were asking us to hit environmental impact. A lot of these CSR and ESG goals are actually driven by the institutional investors because they don't want to be a part of damaging the planet. So they want the companies to have their own plans of how they're doing better. And so they were like, the investors have been asking us for this, but now in the new political climate, the investors are scared to be bullish on that. You know, they've shifted. There's been so much whiplash on that front of climate change and environmental that they were like, they're not asking us for that anymore. In fact, they're kind of shying away from it. And so we as a company don't really know what to do. And now you're offering us a service that is a great service, but costs quite a bit of money, and we're not sure how to use it anymore. And so that business was kind of struggling. It was trying to find itself. And that's where, David and I were like, hey, what if we went and actually entered the marketplace and help people where they are today? Again, that being nimble. And where they are today is, for the last 5 years since the pandemic or longer, people haven't been able to afford to feed their kids meat anymore. It's like families of 4 aren't feeding their kids steak like ever. It's super expensive.
It's an event.
Or they're switching to other proteins or eating less proteins or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we said, what if we met families where they are and said, we can flip the script on this whole grass-fed industry, which has been kind of in that luxury specialty niche space.
Yeah, like
But we
organic
think there's
food, right? And, yeah.
Yeah, we think there's a critical mass of people that know what it is and want it, and particularly want to feed it to their kids. We're in a time where there's more sandwich generation than any time before. There are people feeding young kids and taking care of their aging parents, and there's seeing what happens to yourself if you don't take care of yourself and what the repercussions of age are, and they're raising young kids at the same time. And that was kind of our target market. We said, okay, if we can get to those people and give them the product they want, we can flip the script on what the business model of Norm has been in this space, which is mark it up 30 or 40% before you sell it to the retailer, and say, what if we bring a business at scale, go Main Street, go to Middle America, go to regular grocery stores, make a much, much smaller margin, but you're doing it across a much wider swath. And so I think the timing for that was perfect. Not too many people have approached anything like that before. And so I think we're really paving new ground on that front.
So it's mostly a volume play. Essentially, this works at scale, right? Yeah.
That's exactly it. We're switching it from, and I should be clear, I don't want to take market share from any of the amazing people that we've worked with in the past. We've worked with a lot of companies that, they source from a handful of family farms, or they are a family farm. To be clear, those companies are selling out. Like, they're selling all the product that they can produce. The other interesting thing about timing is the U.S. cow herd is at a 70-year low. We've never had this few animals, and if you want to dig into why that may or may not be the case, I'm happy to give my 2 cents on it, even though I'm not an economist. But that's the reality. They're just
Go ahead. Actually, I'm curious.
Yeah, there aren't animals out on the ground. What I think happened on this front is the market has been evolving, like all markets have been evolving for the last, really the digital age has changed the livestock industry. And what used to happen is animals would go to their local auction yard, companies would buy them up, they take them to their feedlots, they aggregate them, and then it goes down the road and becomes meat from there. Those local auctions would set futures prices. Well, as the digital age,
something happens. Yeah.
What used to happen is ranchers would send their animals to the local auction yard, and then they would go down the road to meat buyers would buy them. They'd go down the road and they'd become meat from there. So the meat processing industry would buy from all these little local auctions. And then as meat companies got more sophisticated in the modern age, they said, why don't we just go to the growers that we like and go to those producers, and we'll contract with them directly, and we'll pay them on performance of how those animals get produced and do what we want them to do. Okay, great. So now like 70-80% of animals get contracted to go to future contracts. Well, the futures market is still hinged to what happens at the local auction. And so the local auction is kind of getting what doesn't sell through the regular market, through the free market. And so it created this weird, perverse data. And we were getting these boom and bust cycles every 5 to 7 years. And so that was kind of the first ground layer of that. And then when the pandemic came on, we just had this little signal. It was such a small little domino effect that people said, oh, we're freaking out. Just like they were buying lots of toilet paper, they filled their freezer with beef. And it created this initial movement of like, oh, there's a bunch of demand. It's artificial demand, but it's a bunch of demand. And that caused ranchers that year to say, and again, not an economist, this is my take on it. But from my perception and from what I've read, that caused ranchers to say, okay, I'm going to take extra animals and sell them this year. And so they sold all their steers, which is males, and they said, oh, we're going to sell a few more heifers this year. This is the females. And so we're not going to hold as many back to become cows. And we're going to sell those animals as well because the market is high. We're in a strong boom and bust cycle, and now there's an added piece of there's more demand happening at the same time, and so people filled their freezers, whatever, and now the next cycle repeats, and there's fewer cows to have fewer babies because we sold the girls. The girls got sold, and there's some girls that get sold every year. This is super normal, but that little bump in a higher number of females being sold, well, now the market goes, oh, there's fewer animals out there next year. Now there's a shortage that can't meet demand. And we created this negative feedback loop that even though the cattle industry is less of an oligarchy than any of the other meat production, you think poultry and pork, it's all done under one house. Literally from breeding, sometimes all the way to harvest happens on the same facility. Livestock, cattle production is still very diversified. It's family ranches all over the world that are raising small herds. Then it goes to a local aggregator and goes out to the bigger global commodity system. Even with that diversification, it's still all sent the same signal. Prices going higher, price keeps going up. And then as the pandemic was running through its course, now you had the media phase of just being crazy for protein. Everybody in COVID, you either got fat or fit, and so either way, you're now thinking about what you eat more coming out of it than you were going in. And so everybody that got fat's going, I got to shed pounds. Everybody that got fit saying, I want to stay in shape. And all of a sudden, protein became the top macro that everybody's talking about, everybody's worried about. And now people can't get enough of it. And everybody kept saying, okay, we're going to sell more heifers. And then they were like, oh, we're going to cull cows, older cows that are part of the herd because there's this insatiable demand for meat. And now we sold the factory. There aren't females out there to get bred to have more calves. If we as an industry started today to try to solve that problem, it would take 5 years. Just the biology of getting animals bred, getting them on the ground, growing them out. It would take 5 years to start going from our downward trend and turn it around and start going to a positive trend. So this isn't going away. It's a fairly U.S. specific problem. And so the other piece of timing here is we came out and said, we're going to source from other countries. We've been spending 10 years building supply chains for these other companies. We're going to source from other countries, but they're fantastic countries. Well, Western countries, high reputations. They have better slaughter plants, better facilities than us. And everybody else that's doing that is lying to you. They're processing here in the U.S. and they say product of the USA right on the package. And we're going to be transparent about it. So the company origin provisions, that was the idea for the name, is we're going to say, sense. These are the people we're sourcing from. We're proud of them. And we're going to tell you their stories. So every package in the back is a QR code that says this is where it's coming from. And that bigger piece, that longer ramble I made is why we don't have a domestic line right now. There just aren't animals out there to buy here in the U.S., even though there's strong demand from consumers to want to have a domestic product. It just isn't there. So we're able to bring costs down, and then we're transparent about what we had to do as part of our business strategy to make that happen.
What do you think is more important to customers? Origin, like country of origin, or cost?
It's a really interesting experiment. In the U.S., and I think North America as a whole, we have such roots about raising livestock that, companies choose a cowboy as their mascot of trust, of adventure, of excitement. These are the early lifestyle brands. Marlboro Man, it was a cowboy, for God's sakes. It's like you can tame the West, you can smoke cigarettes, and it's an interesting experiment. I am surprised how much even the families that are like, I can't afford to feed my family still struggle with the idea of there's an amazing country that if we were looking at wine, we'd be going, these places are the Napa or Bordeaux of grass-fed beef. It's like incredible history, incredible landscapes. And people are still like, I think I'm supposed to buy America.
So like a mental block. Yeah.
We have such an America first mindset in meat, even though across the political spectrum, this is people that wouldn't necessarily be that way about many other things in their life. It is a psychological challenge. And so We're pretty new on that front of trying to disrupt that with that transparency. So I think if we continue to have these dialogues and educate consumers, not all miles to market are created equal. And I ran a lot of ranches that we ran all sorts of efficient trucks all over the place. And, these products are going on a boat, and those boats are super efficient, and it's mass transit. There's tons of stuff on the boat at once. So my attribution to that carbon footprint across that boat is not like I'm running the boat empty with my one container of beef on it, And so I think a lot of it's psychological. You look at the math and it makes total sense. And then you look at the psychology and it's like, well, we just have to talk to people and meet them where they're at.
Yeah, emotion sometimes trumps logic. Um,
Right.
do you think there's a perception that because it's like, coming from another country, it would be not as fresh or not as good, or like, is that the blocker, you think?
Yeah, I think it's funny because we're able to ship fresh and frozen on quicker boats. We're able to ship fresh, and it's actually part of the aging process. And so, to be really clear with people, the
Right. Actually, in your case, it could help, right? Because it's an aging product.
exactly. So the
Yeah.
slaughter happens in country. Initial breakdown of that animal happens in that country, and then we get primals and subprimals shipped on us to a boat. And so those primals actually age on the boat, and so you're getting a more tender, a higher quality product. We're going to do some work this year on nutrient density testing to see if it's like a fermented product, if that aging process
Oh,
actually
sure.
improves digestibility and nutrient
Hmm.
density. But yeah, it comes over here, and then we would do the final cut and wrap, and then send that out to distributors to get into retail stores. So yeah, I think sometimes I think Americans, because we're so isolated in the world, you go to Europe, everybody's got five neighbors of different countries. They've all fought with each other, worked together, collaborated, for millennia.
It's all closer to each other. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we're so isolated. We don't have that. I sometimes think there's this idea of there's this like villain twisting his mustache, like, what can I sell these stupid Americans? And the reality couldn't be further from the truth. It's like it's the same kind of hardworking families that are stewarding their land, that are putting the best genetics into their animals, and have been raising high quality meat for their own culture for millennia. And now they're like, oh, Americans are now aware to the fact that grass fed beef is better for you. Sure, I'll sell it to you. Like I've been raising it for my own family and my own communities forever. So now we'll sell it to you. And so that's really what we're entering into. And then trying to be a bridge for that trust and storytelling so that consumers can see this is a great product. And if it fits your price point, rather than walking by the meat case, you can still get that quality product. And if you can afford domestic, we say right on our website, buy from your local rancher first. And I mean it. I was a local rancher. I came from the livestock industry. I used to go to 8 farmers markets a week in my youth and peddle grass fed beef. If you can buy from them first. But when they're sold out, I want to be your best number two choice. That's convenient and fits the price point that you're able to afford.
Well, so where do you sell your product?
Yeah, so we have national distribution because of our relationships and because of the scale that we were already buying for other clients and being able to support them in their sourcing. We were able to get some pretty big accounts pretty quickly. So we work with co-op grocers across the country. So they have a consortium, the National Co-op Grocer Association. So we work with them. We have distribution through UNFI. So we're in lots of small independents. We're in grocery outlet. We do private label for Aldi, and then we've got some pretty big things in the works right now. So I think you'll see us in a few more brick and mortar retail stores. And part of our disruption strategy was to focus on brick and mortar, get that right first, and then come back to the direct to consumer, the butcher box delivery type
Sure.
concept, direct to consumer, delivery to the door is kind of next. And so we've just
Buy
started
buy
that.
online type thing,
We just
right?
started the online store, and it's a test and learn for us. But the vast majority of our business is, if we're going to take this at scale, we need to go through the places that people are already used to buying product and in their local community. And so we've really focused on making sure that our value prop meets what the retailer needs to be able to pass on a good price to the customer.
Right. And so I assume, knowing that the farmers market crowd is, like somebody who would buy from a farmer's market like maybe once a week would perhaps buy your product at another time at a different location, right? So it's like it's not one or the other. It's probably yeah.
It's additive. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I don't think we're taking market share away from the other better for you, amazing producers. It's taking market share away from conventional. That's the goal in everything that we do. And so when
Yeah.
that
Screw those guys.
yeah, exactly. When the customer is shopping at the farmer's market, you're right. That satisfies their meals, for a couple days. But then somewhere in
Yeah, and to
between,
support their local,
they're buying something else. And so we
providers
want to be
and
that choice when they're buying
mhm.
something else. That's right.
Okay, that sounds great. What's your what's your current position at the company? And I understand you guys are a startup, so you probably have multiple
Yep.
hats, I would guess.
Yep. So I'm
What do you
I'm
focus most of your day on?
Yeah, so I'm co-CEO and co-founder, which we literally don't even have in our email signature because it doesn't mean anything. There's no staff. David and I, this is we've run multiple companies together. We've had big teams before and done all that, but at this point, it's the two of us and then the processing company that we partnered with. There's two guys from that entity that formed this joint venture. So we have all that vertical integration of the processing company that cuts and wraps in Denver for us, which gives us some competitive edge. So we gave up a good amount of equity to make that an important partnership in the business, and that would give us that competitive advantage. But yeah, I got the big heavy title, but day to day, it's you're doing everything from the lowest job to the highest job. We're constantly in that dance between in the business and on the business, and
Mhm.
so in terms of like in the business, I just did a turnaround trip to Portland yesterday. Wasn't a good flight between Sacramento and Portland, so I drove 8 hours up, had a meeting with a grocer at 8 a.m. in the morning, did my dog and pony show, cooked steaks for them, gave them the pitch about why they should work with us. Okay, great, we'll talk, we'll send you some follow-up, got back in the car, drove 8 hours home. And so what I have always been attracted to as an entrepreneur and an intrapreneur is that every day is different. So I had a mentor one time tell me, he's like, "You're a midwife at heart," and so I really like to be at that kind of bleeding edge of like get something started, get the forward base established, and then move on to the next thing. And so this has been great for me to be able to step into that. I tend to be more on the salesy communication, marketing side of the equation. And I think it's really important
Podcast.
to have exactly doing a podcast. I think it's really important for those kind of people you have to know yourself in business. You have to be really honest with yourself of this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not good
Mhm.
at.
Yeah.
And David and I have this classic yin yang between us, and he is much more operational, buttoned up. He answers all his emails every day. His homework's always done on time, and he's super smart on financing, modeling, projections. He's that guy. When a grocery store says, we need to get EDI set up so that our two systems can talk to each other. I'm Googling EDI, and he's like, oh, I know the right company to call, and I have a relationship with them. I worked with them 5 years ago,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so that kind of stuff, so that there's interfaces that make all this run smoothly. And we've just exploited that about each other. We kind of know where one person stops and the other person begins, and also know where there's overlap, that it's like, hey, we're both busy. Who's taking lead on this? And so having that kind of relationship, I think, kind of becomes a superpower over time.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think from a day-to-day perspective, I'm always kind of in that innovation space. And so sometimes you get a little forlorn. You've kind of wrapped one thing up and you're passing it on. This is more systematized, it's working, and it's kind of ready to go. And then it's like, what's my next thing? And you get a little lost for a minute. And so it's this boom and bust cycle of like, now all of a sudden I'm crazy slammed again because I'm in the thick of it. And then you kind of wrap that up and you're like, okay, what's next? And in startup mode, because you're doing all the different jobs, it's 100% that way. I spent all last summer going to small and independent grocery stores because we had this great opportunity with them, and that box is a little bit checked. And so like now I'm doing totally different work today. And so we're trying to launch this online store. I'm relearning Google Ads. I haven't done Google Ads in 10 years, and so trying to figure out what's changed there, what's going to change with AI coming up. So it's pretty eclectic. There's not a boring day, and there's not a day that looks like, a month ago. It's all pretty different day to day, which I love.
So speaking of innovation, obviously the title of this podcast is Innovation Blueprint, so we do need to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
What innovation or what do you see coming up in your industry that you're really excited about that you think is going to be a game changer either for you or, for the rest of the field, let's say?
Yeah, I think at the core of it, there is a customer base that wants better meat that currently isn't getting it. They're walking by the meat case and saying, "Nope, I'm not going to do that this week. Can't afford it. Doesn't fit. Doesn't fit my values. Isn't what I want to do." From an innovation space, I think right now it's really just counter positioning and let's meet them where they are. Everybody else is trying to sell this as a luxury product, and I love when lifestyle brands exist. I'm glad that Yeti Cooler exists. But sometimes I'm on the road and I just need to keep some drinks cold or keep some snacks cold. And I'm just going to go buy a cooler somewhere. And like, I'm glad that Walmart sells coolers or, whoever, the sporting goods store. Like, that's great. I don't need a $400 cooler for everything that I do. And so I think getting this whole space to maturity, that there is a Honda Civic, a Costco type brand, and it's like, we're going to sell you something high quality without compromises, is the innovation at the moment. If we're going to go deeper down that rabbit hole, though, I'll say I'm fairly tortured by the idea of how to create true durability in a commodity sector. And I imagine you deal with this in the clients you have, extractives, oil, gas, mineral.
Mm-hmm.
It's as commodity as it gets, and so is food. And so how do you take a product that is truly commodity and build durability around that, build processes that are not replicatable, to create a cornered resource, to, there's always brand, and brand is great. I'm not poo-pooing brand, but how do you go beyond brand and really have processes and have that ability to not only build moats around yourself, but keep them full of water? That's what keeps me up at night, of how can we do that? And you see some of that in craft foods. And so you've seen, wine did it first, and then it was beer and cheese and chocolate and coffee. They all created at least the brand part of being able to take a commodity and say, this is something more. And some of them did it with process as well. That hasn't really happened at scale in meat yet. So how do we take craft meat, craft protein to that next level? At the same time, the other end of the spectrum is, you've got the technology space trying to create, 3D printed meat, cell-based meat, which is super scary. I think if consumers struggle to buy non-domestic, hopefully they'll struggle with this idea of, whatever you want to call it, constructed meat,
Lab
Franken
growth,
meat, soylent
lab
green.
grown meat, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, that's kind of the other bleeding edge that we're looking at of what's going to happen here. The innovation that has won best in food over the last 40 years has been convenience. So we talk a lot about price. Consumers talk a lot about price. But when apples to apples, you offer them something that's easier, because we all have to eat 2 to 3 times a day, they pick easier every time, and it has a
So
point.
convenience in this case would mean like ready to
Like
eat
ready to
meal or
eat,
like
heat
some
and
kind of,
serve,
yeah, okay.
fast food.
Mm.
And there are trade-offs on health there, depending on what type of products you're choosing.
Yeah.
But those are not the cheapest options. If I want to go through a drive-through somewhere because my kids are being crazy and I'm embarrassed to get out and get the kid out of a car seat and sit in a restaurant, it's not the cheapest option. It is not the cheapest option to feed your family, but it is fast and it's hot. And so
Right.
convenience
Yeah.
does kind of supersede price. So we've thought a lot about that space and how we could enter there. There's like these sous vide meals that are becoming more popular, where they're taking low grade cuts. The company, process it for you, low and slow cooking. So all you have to do is pop it in your oven and it's pre-seasoned. And then you've got this
Yeah.
like pot roast or, pulled
Mm.
pork or, and so we're thinking along those lines. Where can we create innovation that again meets the consumers with their values, which, whether they say it or not, convenience is a high value for the customer right now, the modern customer. And
Yeah,
so
especially when you have kids, right? Of
100%.
course.
Yeah.
Like you only have so many hours in a day, and if there's a way, but I do think, like, at least from my perspective, I think consumers, and you touched on it earlier and the show, is they're a little closer. They take a closer look at what they eat, right? From a health perspective, from a fitness perspective. And so, like, I'm not sure, I haven't seen any numbers, or, I haven't uh, dug into it, but like, I would assume like the ready to eats that traditionally were, a good option, or perhaps less so now, just because there's more YouTube videos about, cooking at home and meal prep and what's a good option, what's a bad option. Podcasts are talking about it. So do you think, if you were to enter that, it would be with kind of a focus on health and
For sure.
something lean essentially.
For sure. How do you have your cake and eat it too? Which I guess is not a healthy
Hmm.
analogy, but how do
Well, it's an organic,
yeah.
vegetables cake.
Yeah, how do you have that organic and grass-fed product that does fit your values, but still meets the stage of life that you're in, that you are caring for young kids, and maybe you're taking care of your aging parents, or other family members. How do you have something that gives you time back without the compromises? And so that's definitely some of where we're thinking and heading and looking to in the future in terms of new products. The snack stick phase is blowing up, because it's easy. You can have in your purse, you can have in your backpack, and you just pull out a snack stick, and now you've got a good healthy source of protein. So yeah, we're looking at a lot of that stuff right now. Of as part of that strategy to build durability is how do you have innovative owned IP products that's like this is our recipe, this is our formula, to be able to bring something to consumers and solve problems for them.
Right. So more IP. I love it. Final question for you, Chris, today. What's a piece of software you couldn't live without at the company?
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, what's a piece of software I couldn't live without? I'm gonna brainstorm here out loud. So we use Google Suite, Google Suite a ton. Um, Chat GPT, Gemini is working into our workflow pretty regularly. We had and I know, AI is probably super disruptive for you guys in your industry right now in terms of what's this all going to mean for the future. And it's like, it's such a world of like excitement and terrifyingness, like at the same time. But like we had a piece of equipment go down at the plant and we had the tech come out to work on it. And so the company sends a tech. This is a very high paid, very specialized tech. Um,
And then you open
you know,
ChatGPT.
and he like can't figure it out. And so literally the plant manager opens Chat GPT and turns the camera on, and Chat GPT is like, this connection's loose.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Like it's like this
Wow.
connection's loose. And we're like bloop, and like connected the like connector back on. And now that part wasn't shorting and the piece worked again. The equipment worked again.
Big question. Did you pay that repair guy?
I don't know. I think the company covered it, but yeah. I think his company would is built into part of our warranty on the piece of equipment. But yeah, probably would have been frustrated if we had to pay the bill on that one. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Let me think for just 1 second here.
And by the way, while you think about maybe other software, similar situation happened to me, except to have a knee injury, and then I went to physical therapy, and my therapist had one idea, and then ChatGPT had another, and turns out ChatGPT was right. And
yeah.
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe I'll take a different swing at it. Of there's an aspect of this business that we're very aware couldn't have existed 15 years ago. And I've worked remote for 15 years, but even stuff like this, being able to be on a Zoom, being able to be on a Microsoft Teams call, the culture's readiness to accept remote work and to be able to just everybody now is doing it, and when I started, I was trying to Skype people and they were like, what do it's like,
Skype.
it
Wow,
wasn't where the world was.
that's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Exactly. Post pandemic, everybody's willing to accept remote, and we use it totally to advantage. Like our entire one guy lives in Missouri, one guy lives in Colorado, two of us live in California, but far apart.
Yeah,
Uh, and it
it'd be
allows us,
impossible to run a business like that with four people
yeah,
20
it
years
allows
ago.
us to work together just like we're in an office, but then be regional to where it's like we're each hitting different clients, different accounts, different suppliers because we're located in different spaces. And so, we become our own quality assurance team. We're buying different product off the shelves at different retailers. We're meeting with different retailers without having to hop on a plane. There's some magic there that we're very aware of that I think, 10 years ago, it'll be like, oh, we have to be in an office together. And we just don't, and everybody's kind of cool with that now. So, I don't know. That's a piece of it. I'm a little bit of a Luddite. I try, I try to stay up with what's happening in software, but I'm a little.
So how do you use Gemini? I'm curious.
I'm probably using that one more to replace search and Chat GPT more for broader, more of a Swiss Army knife type tool.
Yeah. Okay. Fair.
I don't know. Some part of me is kind of sort of rooting for Google. I don't know. I grew up in the Google era. I want to see what they're able to do.
I mean, you don't have to root for them. They're winning. It's
They're
okay.
winning. Well,
Yeah,
they
they're
were
already-
5 years ago. 5 years ago, they looked like they were Apple. They were sitting on their hands, on the AI.
No, but
thing,
I think
so.
they're like they're sneaky.
Oh, yeah.
They were always there, and they were kind of like watching all the other guys spend a shit ton of money without revenue, and they're like, we
Yeah.
happen to own all this data, and we
Yeah,
actually have products
exactly.
people buy.
We have data centers. Oh, we have chips. Oh, now we have LLM.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and so all of a sudden, surprise, we're number one.
exactly. Yeah.
Have you played with Nano Banana Pro, or which one is
I
it?
have
Yeah, the new
not.
one.
Yeah, it's been on my list, and it's funny.
It's
like,
insane. It's actually it's insane.
yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know. I was so personally bullish on technology as a young person, and then it's funny. It's just like human nature to become this Luddite that you have kids, you're taking care of your parents, you're running around, you're running businesses, and it's really hard to find those times of like, I'm just gonna go play. I don't have an objective for this, but I'm just gonna go find the time to just play on this digital adventure. And I don't know. I struggle to find that. My wife and I talk all the time because we both, the type of work that we do, could really benefit from all these tools. And it's like, we just need to like carve out a day, just like Friday. We're just gonna go
1 hour,
spend 2 hours and learn a new tool and just play with it and see how it makes into our workflow. So
listen, I hear you. My wife's been trying to get me to watch the new Stranger Things season for 3 weeks, and we haven't gotten the time yet. So
yeah. We did that with The Last of Us. We just started season 2 of The Last of Us, and it's like we're 6 months late to the party. Yeah. So,
I haven't even seen that yet.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. This was really
Phil.
great, and a fresh take. We don't have that many food industry people on the show, so always. And the big question is, when can when are you coming to Canada? I guess.
Well, I mean, in a pre-tariff world, we were pretty interested in it, and now all of a sudden, everybody got weird, but it's still on the list. So hopefully,
yeah. What happened with that? That was weird.
I don't know.
It is weird. No.
I should try to not talk about politics. Yeah,
we'll see. Give it a couple years.
Yeah, exactly.
Nature will take its course. Chris, thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Phil. Have a good one.